What's up, everybody? This is Chris Surratt bringing you another edition of the Car Concierge Show, the show that helps you with the buying, selling, maintaining, and repairing of all your vehicles. On today's show, we're going to touch on something that we always pretty much touch on, is the loss of jobs over at GM. We're also going to talk about a battery company, automotive battery company out of California that is deciding to move its jobs overseas. And last but not least, we're going to visit one of the best content creators out there, Mr. Anton Daniels, and check out his view on Shawn Fain and the UAW situation when it comes to Stellantis. Now, first, let's jump into it. And of course, this is just a weekly thing for us. We constantly are talking to you guys about layoffs in the automotive industry. Mostly the layoffs at the factories, dealerships closing. This is a standard thing that we talk about on this show. So my, 15, 20 consistent people constantly see me talking about the layoffs in the automotive industry. And of course, ever since the UAW situation and the raise in pay that they gave some of these factory workers, we've seen a multitude of layoffs in a multitude of factories, specifically mostly in Michigan, of course, because Michigan is the main hub for the automotive industry that we know. But it continues, and it's just getting worse. Just getting worse for any person who is in the automotive industry, specifically working in factories or anything like that. The UAW debacle, I'm going to call it the UAW debacle from now on, is still reverberating throughout the automotive industry. So let's check out the latest situation of layoffs that are happening over at GM.
General Motors says it is building toward the future, but apparently the future means less jobs in its workforce. It's cutting a number of them, including at its tech center in Warren. Another wave of layoffs hits the automotive industry, and this time the Detroit News reports 1,000 General Motors salaried employees worldwide, including 600 at its global technical center in Warren. While GM wouldn't confirm the exact number to Fox 2, a spokesman said in a statement, the Big Three giant is focused on the future, saying in part, quote, "We must simplify for speed and excellence, make bold choices, and prioritize the investments that will have the greatest impact. As a result, we're reducing certain teams within the software and services organization. We are grateful to those who helped establish a strong foundation that positions GM to lead moving forward."
Employees, when they're laid off, a high percentage of them tend to either move or drop out of the labor force. And I think that's a concern.
We keep seeing waves and waves of layoffs. We know that it can be somewhat common in the automotive industry, but why does it feel like there seem to be more and more lately?
Well, the auto industry is dealing with some real challenges right now. I mean, they had the whole issue with the transition as a result of the COVID recession that kind of wreaked havoc with inventories.
Dr. Michael Greiner is a professor of management at Oakland University. He also worked in Warren and says that GM is considered a big fish in that community. Last year, GM cut 1,300 jobs at two of its Michigan factories. But General Motors isn't the only Big Three automaker forced to make cost-cutting measures as these companies adjust from gas-powered vehicles to electric. Both Ford and Stellantis have cut hundreds and up to thousands of positions in the past year. For some of the smaller Metro Detroit communities, it creates a trickle-down effect on local mom-and-pop shops.
Explain the impact that the workforce brings, not just to the offices there, but to the greater Warren community and Metro Detroit community as well.
Yeah, the incomes of the employees there have what we call a multiplier effect, which means that it's money coming from outside of the community. The difference that we have, though, with these jobs is if these employees go and get a job somewhere else, they might not be coming back to Warren. They might not be coming back to Macomb County.
While General Motors will not confirm which other locations will be impacted, the Detroit News reports that employees will be laid off in California, Texas, and Canada. In Warren, I'm Brandon Hudson, Fox 2 News.
It's truly sad how back in the day when I was growing up, it was those parents who had jobs in the automotive industry or at the factories were the families who were doing well. They were the families that had homes. They were families that had the nicer cars. Growing up, I mean, my grandmother, she was a president of a UAW at a factory that made semi-trucks back in Indiana. And it was a lot. So many people that I knew, families that I knew whose parents worked in the factories, in the automotive factories, in the steel factories over in Gary or East Chicago, and in Chicago itself, in the automotive industries over in Detroit, all through Michigan. It hurts. It hurts because I know that a good percentage of the people who were doing well in life, because these jobs paid well, considerable to other jobs. Automotive jobs paid well. Factory jobs paid really well. If you were in a position where, most people wanted just to work in the factory. They knew they'd be paid well. They knew that they'd have, weekends off. It was a big thing for a person to look forward to or aim towards working in an automotive factory. And as of late, there's been so many mass layoffs that so many people who are getting paid fairly well, depending on where they worked and what department they worked, but they were getting paid fairly well to be in the automotive industry just to lose their job. And the biggest problem for me, of course, is that these people that work in these factories, they're not at a point where they're educated to get, better paying jobs at other places. Then you go into the factory and they teach you a line job, a skill. You are putting sheet metal into a board. You're on the line. And on the line, you have certain jobs that you do, but they're not jobs that you could use or skills that you could use outside of the factory to find you gainful employment. And that's what worries me the most. Most of these people, specifically in these factories, software people, there's a different story. Those people, they might be able to get another job because they have particular skills that are going to be profitable in the future, profitable in the long run. So I'm not extremely worried about the people who are losing their software jobs. They can go into cybersecurity or any kind of tech position. They might be fine. But more for me, it's about those people that are on the line. Once those people lose their jobs and there's no other factories around that would hire them, which is another thing. Right now, my brother, I went home last week because my brother's birthday was on Thursday, and I wanted to see my family. Of course, I'm looking to open up a dealership myself, so I looked at a couple of dealerships that had closed back in Indiana to see, which one would be right for me to purchase. But my brother, he has been a factory worker his whole life. And he is working at a new factory now because, of course, the old factory that he worked at closed. And he's doing pretty much the same kind of position, working with sheet metal. But if this factory job that he's working at now closes, he's not going to be able to go out into the world that's not factory work and find him a position that's going to pay him very well. And which is, I mentioned to him trying to look for other things, but it's neither here nor there. We've reached the age where it's almost retirement anyway. But I say that to say that if you worked in the automotive industry for any amount of time, specifically worked in a factory, then you understand that if you lose that position, then it's going to be hard unless you thought ahead and planned and continued to learn while you're still in the factory. It's going to be hard for you to find positions. And that's why we talk about this all the time. We talk about these layoffs because it is such a detriment to our world. It's such a detriment to people who have worked in a certain position for so long, learned it so well, got paid so well, so they grew up, they raised their family on this pay. And then to lose that pay and then have to search for another position, dollars and donuts, find a position that doesn't pay as well, so have to live off less than you've been living off for quite some time, will throw a person into a horrible quandary of life. a horrible, horrible quandary of a life, and that is what's happening a lot in the automotive industry right now, specifically in the factories, specifically in Michigan, because that is pretty much where the majority of the automotive factories are. Almost every week we talk about layoffs at some factory in Michigan, Wisconsin, in the Midwest altogether. It's falling apart. And the Midwest is not known for its people who delve into education. It's not known for a lot of entrepreneurship. So the Midwest is an area that these type of things are going to hurt a little bit more than across the nation. So let's keep it in that vein and talk about California. California is one of those places where things are hard. Of course, I'm talking about California. I live in California. I am bi-coastal per se. I spend a good majority of my time in Indiana. You know, I have a lot of businesses and property there, so I spend a lot of time in Indiana, but I do live in California. And California has been going through a terrible time as well, just like the automotive industry, where it comes to keeping jobs. California has lost so many industries. Tesla, so many industries have just up and left California, partially due to the raising costs, partially due to how it's being managed or governed. But it has been bad for quite some time. And it's, of course, I have to say that's probably why I'm so adamant about my moving situation on setting up all my businesses in Indiana. Not only because it's where I'm from, but California has started to take a toll on my pockets as well. So I'm going to have to make some adjustments in that realm. But California is losing a lot more, and when it comes to the automotive industry, they're losing companies. So, I'm going to read a little story about a battery company that has decided to venture out and take its, employees and its company overseas and get it out of California. Let's check it out. All right, this is going to be a reader. Of course, we always go with our automotive news. This is from August 20th. So, battery maker Northvolt to shift research and development from California to Sweden. The move comes as the company reviews its expansion plans following setbacks, including production delays and order cancellations. Stockholm. Battery maker Northvolt will consolidate and shift development of lithium-metal battery technology to its research and development hub in Västerås, Sweden, from California. The decision comes as the company carries out a strategic review to refocus its expansion plans after experiencing a series of setbacks such as production delays and a customer canceling an €2 billion order. The transfer reflects a strategic move to consolidate the research and development and industrialization of Northvolt's cell product portfolio into one location, the company said in a statement on August 20th. BMW said in June that it had canceled its $2 billion order with Northvolt for battery cells for its electric vehicles. Northvolt acquired California battery technology company Suberg in 2021, a 25-staffer operation that has since grown to over 200 and focused on developing lithium-metal battery technology. The move will result in Suberg being closed down, the battery maker confirmed to Reuters, and said the shift would yield cost reductions, but declined to disclose how much savings it expected to achieve. All employees at Suberg will be laid off, the company said, it encouraged the workers to apply for open positions in other arms of Northvolt. Automakers and other manufacturers have some time looked to source batteries away from China, with Northvolt considered by many as a pioneer in battery cell production in Europe. Northvolt currently makes its batteries at a factory in northern Sweden. In addition to R&D move, the strategic review underway is expected to address expansion changes. In July, Northvolt CEO Peter Carlson told Swedish business daily Dagens Industry that it would need to focus on making sure its blueprint factory in Skellefteå Sweden was working first and foremost. This could result in a halt or delay of its other plans, which include expansions in Sweden as well as gigafactories in Germany and Canada. We've been a little too aggressive in our expansion plans, and that is what we are now reviewing, Carlson told the paper in July. All right, so just another horribility of not only the United States, but California losing more jobs. And man, we talk about this so much. It's crazy. It's crazy. And what's killing us is that even in this article, they're talking about how they're building gigafactories in Germany and places like that. Nobody's talking about building anything here. BYD is building a factory in Mexico. Northvolt is building a factory in Canada. They're building factories in Germany, in Sweden. They just avoiding the U.S. They're avoiding the U.S. now. They're jumping ship. Why? Are we too expensive? Do we have too many demands? Are they just wanting to use child labor over in these other countries? Who knows? But we're not getting those dollars. We're losing jobs. I've been watching the Democratic National Convention and listen to all these speakers, and they talk about how Harris and Biden brought all these jobs in. And I weekly speak about tens of thousands of jobs losing. Tens of thousands of jobs leaving to go over to Canada, to go over to Sweden, or companies just closing down completely. Factories losing jobs, factories consolidating. It's our world. The U.S. is in so much trouble right now when it comes to these type of things. I believe that there are some people who are taking advantage of these situations, and I'm proud of those people. But these people, specifically the people who work in these factories, the people who have only worked at these factories and have no viable skills to find positions to work in other places, these are the people that I feel for. These are the people who are going to just be put out. They're only going to be able to get menial work. And you know that they raise families on these good jobs. They probably purchase homes on these good jobs, and lose these good jobs and be put in a position when you're more closer to poverty than not. It's painful. It's destructive. It's destructive for our whole country. And that's what we talk about consistently. Consistently talk about how in the automotive industry, think about since the UAW brouhaha with the big three and Stellantis and GM and all these places, think about all after that. They raised people's hourly rate, okay? 2-3 months down the line, they just start canning people. And we knew it was going to happen, because how were they going to be able to pay these people more money? How are we going to pay all these people more money if the businesses are not doing well? How are they going to be able to pay these people more money when the businesses are not making sales? When they're in trouble, they're getting cyber hacked and put down and not being able to continue to work. They're closing places. All of the money that was meant to supply these employees with these raises and all these things was never there. It was never there. With the loss of market share that all these automakers, specifically here in the U.S., have lost when it comes to EVs, when it comes to vehicles coming out of China, all the market share made it impossible for the UAW situation to come true without a big backlash of getting lots of UAW people fired. Lots of UAW people fired, and lots of people just working in the factory fired that's not even members of the UAW, because those factories can't afford to pay these exorbitant hourly rates. it's not a good thing. It's you know, I knew that the UAW situation was going to be a bad situation for America altogether. I knew the minute it happened. I remember I knew when they were saying, "Oh, we're gonna start, paying more." And at first, of course, you're happy. You're happy that people are going to be making more money. They're going to have more opportunity because they got more money. But I knew that there was an other side to that coin. We knew it was an other side to that coin. And that other side of that coin was not going to be a good side. It was terminations for people who are at the bottom of the pole. And the people at the top of the pole are going to get these raises, and they ain't going to keep their jobs either. Hours are going to be cut, or they're going to have to, with the people that they were, let go, the people at the top are just going to have to work more because they're going to have to fill those positions. And they're not going to fill those positions with new people. They're going to fill them with more time from the people they have. It's a horrible cycle. It's a horrible cycle, and the automotive industry is suffering so much from it. So, last but not least, what we're going to do is we're going to check out one of my favorite content creators, and we're going to see his view on Stellantis and the UAW layoffs. And we're really doing this because, my loyal fan base of 15, 20 watchers, I want you guys to, I'm showing you this because I want you to hear the automotive industry and how it's going from somebody who is very well versed in talking, and he probably is going to do his own car show, so you guys are probably going to have to go over there to catch some stuff from him. But he's just a wonderful curator, wonderful talker, wonderful speaker. So, and he did this fantastic soliloquy about the automotive industry. And I want to introduce you guys. Most of you guys already know him because he's just one of the greatest content creators on YouTube right now. So we're going to see what he has to say about the latest situation over at Stellantis and Shawn Fain. And then I'm going to let you guys out of here, okay? So, this is Anton Daniels, AntonDaniels.com. He has a show called The Millionaire Morning Show. He has several shows. Just one of the greatest content creators and speakers out there. You really check him out. He has a great Discord, great Patreon. He's very knowledgeable. Teaches you a lot about finances and pretty much everything. So we're gonna check out his view of the latest situation with Stellantis and Shawn Fain, and just pretty much go from there.
Let's get into these layoffs. Let's spend 10 minutes on this. Shawn Fain, I warned y'all. I warned y'all. I warned y'all. I warned y'all. I told you. I told you. I warned you. And I said, listen, you are seriously going to shoot yourself in the foot. When this whole UAW, we seen Biden go over there to try to get the UAW's endorsement and stuff, Shawn Fain is now running around and saying, oh my God, Stellantis is a problem over there. He released a recent Facebook advertisement because he knows that he's probably going to be speaking at the Democratic National Convention. And so Shawn Fain, the president of the UAW, who I believe is in bed with the Harrison Biden administration, ran around and he was celebrated amongst all of the people. And instead of him working with the companies and ensuring that both, the negotiated thing is tied in with the performance of the company, similar to how CEO pay is doing, and they get incentives and then they get raises and stuff like that. Instead of him working with the company, what you're starting to see is layoffs on a mass scale. I'm in Detroit. I know people. I'm related to people whose plants are going down to one shift, and they are basically creating permanent layoffs, and they running amok.
Me too. That was a big thing when I was at home last week, or back in Indiana last week. I visited so many family. I went over to Flint, Michigan, went over to Cassapolis, Michigan, South Bend, Elkhart, Michigan City. I just visit as much family as I could. And my main thing is that I was pretty much asking everybody who they were voting for, Harris or Trump, and it was pretty mixed. The result was pretty mixed. I was impressed that so many people in that area were voting for Trump and can see past the veil of Harris. But it was really interesting, and but to his point, there was I met a lot of people who were unemployed, a lot of people whose factories had closed down. I have a cousin he's working at a automotive factory right there in Flint, Michigan, I think, or it was a parts. They were making some kind of automotive part, and they had moved him down to 3 days a week, and it's consistent. It's happening all over the place. I remember back when I was growing up, it was the automotive industry was life. Like I said before, my grandmother was president of UAW, and she worked at a factory that made semis. So, she was in the automotive industry. My mother went into medical, of course. My father at that time was a truck driver, even back then. But we spent a lot of time with a lot of people that were in the UAW, a lot of time with people who worked in factories. So it was those people who really built us. But let's go back.
And as J.D. Vance say, and as a lot of these politicians say, and they're absolutely right, when you start to see layoffs in Michigan, everybody should be concerned.
Remember, this is the woman who voted to preserve NAFTA, to extend NAFTA, the very trade deal that sent American auto jobs to Mexico by the tens of thousands and turned American dreams into nightmares.
Let me stop there for a second so I can educate people on NAFTA, because a lot of people are not familiar with NAFTA. When you see our country's jobs, when our jobs were leaving, and a lot of y'all may be too young, or you wasn't a part of the workforce, or maybe you were super young and you wasn't familiar because you never did the history lesson. Here in Michigan, the history was right in front of our face, because most of our grandfathers or our fathers and things like that, my father in particular was brought up here by his father, and his father's name was Aurelius. And Aurelius was from Dawson, Georgia, so the majority of my family was from the South, down in the South. And Aurelius came up to Michigan because this is where all the auto jobs are. So my grandfather, who has now passed away, came up here, got an auto job, and then sent for my father and his uncle and his wife, right? And then they came up here and they joined him, and times were great, right? So they all came up here to get auto jobs, which eventually led to him being able to fund his construction company and stuff like that, and so on and so forth, right? And so we moved to Detroit, or they moved to Detroit, and this was way before they had me. And if you know anything about the auto industry back then, it was booming. It was a pathway. Really, it was the foundation of America. The steel industry and the auto industry was the backbone of America. And so most of our uncles and our grandfathers and things like that, we knew somebody that worked in the auto industry. And it's not far-fetched that you had somebody in your family that can give you what we called A-plan papers. Now it's called employee pricing. They changed the name of it. But what's called A-plan papers, because if you work for the company, then you basically can give A-plan papers to a family member, which would allow for you to get a discount on how much you can finance a vehicle for, right? And so
we always loved that. I mean, we got that, or not me, but my mother, I know that she got her first vehicle because of my grandmother being a president of the UAW. I don't know, it was the A-plan papers. I think that already got gone to employee pricing at that point, but you know what he's talking about. And it's consistent. They still have employee pricing nowadays. It's just not as good as it was back then.
So if you are familiar with that time, right? Because my father, obviously, and his father before him, and even if you wasn't a part of Ford, Chrysler, or GM, the big three, you worked at an auto supplier. So you could be at a Lear, you could be at some other auto supplier that was then dependent on the auto industry for them to thrive. I worked in the steel industry. I worked at auto suppliers, and I worked at the steel industry. I worked at what was Rouge Steel, which then turned into, I forgot what the name of it was. Severstal. It got bought out by a Russian company, but they still have parameters and having to keep jobs here in the United States of America. Then it turned into something else, TK, something else, I don't know. And if you go down to Gary, Indiana, in which I've toured Gary, Indiana, and I've looked at these steel mills and stuff like that, it's largely a ghost town, and it's been absolutely decimated by what happened during the Bush and the Clinton administration as far as them giving our jobs away. So I'm giving you a little mini history so you can understand where I'm coming from. And why is it so passionate for me? And so the union then unionized way back then because they were advocating for safety and workers' rights and the ability to be able to negotiate, right? And so they were actually a good thing. It was good for the time because it was an industry that was largely unregulated, and so they was paying people what they wanted to, and they was firing people and all of this stuff. And so the union was created for the worker, and it was a good thing because it allowed for us, us middle classers, a path and comfort and wage growth and safety and fairness inside of it and all of this stuff, right? But the union largely became a nuisance because by the time that I got into it, in the early 2000s in the steel industry, it was a place that was basically protecting all of the ones that was the worst of the workers. If you was out there late all the time, they can negotiate. I seen chicks busting it down for their union reps for a real one. That's a fact. I don't want to name no names, but it largely became a thing that was in cahoots with the company, and it didn't benefit the worker. And a lot of times they just protected, and they spent the majority of their time helping people that should have been fired a long time ago. And so the union then became a nuisance. Then came 2008, and jobs just exponentially left. Even though it was already being pared down by technology, jobs just absolutely got decimated. Flint used to be one of the most thriving economies in the United States of America, and they absolutely got decimated. Detroit got decimated during the 2008 crisis. A lot of places just absolutely got destroyed. Gary, Indiana, a lot of places was just suffering, right? And so when we think about and we talk about negotiating the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the reason that I want to give you this information is that I want to empower you. I want to educate you. I want you to know what you're talking about when you go into these debates with people that don't know anything about what they're talking about. The Clinton administration, the Bush administrations, those administrations, mainly the Clinton administration, gave away American jobs for short-term prosperity. They sold your jobs away. They allowed for our manufacturers to basically take jobs over to China, to outsource our jobs over to Mexico, to give a lot of our jobs over to Canada. And so what was built was called the North American Free Trade Agreement. And so when they say that the majority of the cars are made here in the Americas, they're basically saying Mexico, United States, Canada. So they don't have to say it's being made in the United States of America. They saying that it's made in North America. It's made over here, where all of this is connected. Canada, Mexico, all of that. And so what these companies then did was not only did they ship jobs over to India, to Taiwan, to China in order to manufacture a lot of this stuff. If you look at the price sheet, and it shows you exactly what percentage of the parts are made here in the United States of America and how many is made is made overseas or in a different country. A lot of times they include Mexico and Canada in that. So it may be assembled here or it may be assembled over in Mexico and then it's shipped over here in the United States of America, but it still does not benefit American manufacturing and jobs. So when people then say, man, I love Clinton and all of this stuff, Clinton manufactured the housing crisis and Clinton ultimately manufactured giving away North American jobs. So when Trump then came into office, he wanted to stop the bleeding. And one of the things that he did was that he renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement instead of Kamala Harris and the Biden administration just extending it by default. And what foreign countries then started to do, including China, was that they would then start to ship in the majority of their cars into Mexico, assemble them in Mexico, and then say that they was made here, and then ship them in the United States of America, and then they would get past whatever it was that was negotiated as far as the North American Free Trade Agreement.
Now, and that's one of the things that's going to happen, to continue to happen, because what we're finding, of course, is that specifically with the losses that Stellantis has had and all of the layoffs and all of the job cuts and all the executives that have jumped ship, we see that these companies are in dire straits. And what happens when these situations when companies are in dire straits? They start needing assistance. So they start looking outside of the company for financial assistance, for companies to go in with them, to partner with them. And what's going to happen is, of course, and I think I said this on my last show, is it's going to be a corporate raider situation. I honestly think Stellantis is turning into a corporate raider. But let's hear what Anton has to say, and we'll get into that later.
Well, Trump sought to stop all that, and that's what he did. Not only did he institute the tariffs on China in order to set the foundation for American jobs, but he also renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement with Canada and Mexico in order to stop them from having a competitive advantage for Americans, which would then incentivize American auto manufacturers and manufacturers in general to make vehicles and to make stuff here back in America. So he set the foundation that Biden and Harris was supposed to run on, and they fumbled it. They fumbled it. And the UAW, instead of working along with the Trump administration, which he saved their jobs, decided that they wanted to partner with and sell out to the Biden administration just so that they could continue to do this identity politics thing and to stay remaining Democrat, knowing that the majority of their members was going to suffer as a result of it. So now when you see Stellantis and all these other companies starting to lay off because they cannot control costs and they can't compete with other auto manufacturers, including BYD, who is going to be coming into the United States of America and buying up all of these companies, now you can see why it's important
Another thing we touched on several times is BYD and their move to build their factory in Mexico, which of course would go into the NAFTA situation he was talking about. And even myself, I am a fan of BYD. I've met with some of their people. I've checked out a couple of their vehicles. These vehicles are fantastic. Price-wise, they're pretty good as well. And eventually they'll make it over here. There's no way that the way the automotive industry is going, even with the 100% tariffs that they're trying to initiate, that China's going to avoid, they're not going to pull out any stops to avoid them having the ability to bring their vehicles into the Americas, to allow Americans to purchase their vehicles. We're just too big a market to avoid. So they understand that they're getting their stuff together. BYD is just right now standing on the sidelines, getting their stuff together, building factories in Mexico, dropping off vehicles here in the United States so we can check them out, because there's a couple of people who have BYD vehicles here. I know for a fact. And they're just biding their time, probably waiting to see how this election goes, so they'll know how to get around the tariff situation. They've already talked about it, how they're already building a situation where they have enough money already set aside to pay off these tariffs so they can start shipping their vehicles over from Mexico to the United States. They're preparing for this. And it's getting to the point where we're starting to feel like Stellantis is not for America. It feels like to me that Stellantis is starting to do a fantastic job of destroying the automotive industries here in America. But let's keep going.
For you to vote the way that you do, because you're not just doing it for your current circumstances, you're doing it for your children. You're doing it for your children. The United States of American auto manufacturers, including Ford, Chrysler, and GM, they even stopped making cars in the United States of America over the last 10 to 15 years. That's why they got rid of all of the cars. That's why you don't see no Ford Fusions. You don't see no Focuses being sold here. You don't see no Malibus. You don't see none of those cars being made here in the United States of America. They got rid of it. They got rid of the Chevy Cruze. They got rid of all of that stuff. And only the cars that are made here, either they're luxury cars to where they can have a market for them, or they're made in another completely different country and they ship here in the United States of America. That's why Buick is largely made in China. It's a Chinese company now that is now shipping cars into the United States of America, and you're buying it because you're saying, well, it's an American company. No, it's a company that profits, but then ultimately the majority of the jobs is made over in China. Buick is...
How many people knew that the Buicks were coming from China? Not many people knew that, right? I mean, the word Buick, you think it's an American-made vehicle. You jump in it. I honest to God, heard somebody say maybe 3 weeks ago that they had a what was it? A Buick Enclave. Buick Enclave? Yeah, it was a Buick Enclave. And we were talking about, I was telling him about I was talking about the Tesla. And he thought, in his mind, he thought the Tesla was a Chinese vehicle. He's like, man, he said, like, man, I'm gonna stick with my American-made Buicks, bro. I'm not gonna go for none of this Chinese stuff. I wanted to bust his bubble so bad, but I didn't. I did not bust his bubble. I had something else to do. I didn't want to go and get to this long conversation to him to explain to him that the vehicle he's driving really wasn't from America. But this is not uncommon. We all think that these cars we driving are from here, but they're not. NAFTA makes us think that they are, but they're not. And it's going to continue that way. The market share for vehicles that have been made here in America by Americans is almost completely gone. Let's keep going.
Largely a Chinese company. That is a fact. The majority of these cars and stuff is assembled and made for the Chinese market and adapted here for the United States of America. And so when J.D. Vance says, because he can't go into this large lesson, right? When J.D. Vance says they voted to extend the North American Free Trade Agreement, Trump went in and renegotiated it because he did it on the behalf of the United States auto manufacturers and the people that depend on those jobs and the people that are creating jobs in the United States of America. But because you're so ignorant, you will then say, well, Trump is racist. Trump is racist. Instead of realizing that he's the one that's actually saving your job. He's not trying to control the manufacturing process. He's incentivizing manufacturers to create jobs and to create vehicles here, good paying American jobs, which ultimately spurs the American economy because you keep more money flowing within our own country. But people are ignorant. And so you listen to a Shawn Fain that gives you these talking points, or you listen to these people that's on TikTok and stuff that don't know nothing about economies, they don't know nothing about policy, they don't know anything about laws, they can't break down exactly what happened in past presidential cabinets and things like that of how they sold out your country, but then you lean on them in order to continue to give you the thing that's worse for you when you're voting against your own best interest. So when he put the tariffs in place that Biden and Harris continued to extend and they didn't get rid of the tariffs, they did that for a reason because they know that he had a good idea. And they would like to take advantage of the fact that he renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement. And so then they start to say, well, we created American jobs. No, Trump set the foundation that you guys couldn't capitalize off of because you don't understand economic policy. I'm supposed to be playing this video, ain't I? I'm sorry, y'all. Let me go ahead and play this video. I'm sorry.
She supported by the tens of thousands and turned American dreams into nightmares. She supported these EV mandates that tax you, took your money, and sent it to electric vehicles that are made in China instead of made right here in the state of Michigan, destroying thousands of Michigan auto jobs in the process. Kamala Harris now is standing here in Michigan asking us for a promotion. I think it's time to say to Kamala Harris, no thank you, you are fired.
And that is Ohio Senator and Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance campaigning in Byron Center, Michigan yesterday. He's blaming VP Kamala Harris for sending auto jobs to China and to Mexico. Vance's comments come as Stellantis has plans to lay off nearly 2,500 workers at the Warren Truck Assembly plant in Michigan that currently builds an older version of the Ram 1500 pickup truck.
And they have no new investment, zero new investment, and I warned y'all that this was about to happen. I warned y'all that this was about to come. They are going to start laying off people at a mass rate. I almost don't even want Trump to even win this election. And it's not because I don't think that he would be best for the economy. I don't think that y'all would appreciate it. I don't think that y'all would appreciate it. I think that we need to suffer. I'm going to get into that shortly.
Joining me now is Michigan Congressman John James, member of the House Foreign Affairs and Energy and Commerce Committees. He's also an Iraq War veteran. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you.
You keep saying I thought that Buick was American in hell. Buick is American. It's owned by General Motors, but it's largely made for the Chinese market. And so the majority of the parts and the majority of Buick itself is manufactured and shipped over here to sell in the American market, but it's largely supporting Chinese jobs. It's supporting jobs that's not here in the United States of America. It's sold here to you as a consumer, but it's made for the Chinese market. And so, yes, it is a GM product, but it's ultimately sold to you. That's being manufactured overseas. It's not being built over here in the United States of America.
Again, for your service to our great country. I want to get your take on what's going on in Michigan here, because you've got a real change of sentiment. Whereas we used to see all the auto jobs churning about in Michigan, it's totally changed now. You've got so much production happening in China because of the electric vehicle push. What are your constituents saying about this?
Very, very concerned. But look about this, Maria. Michigan is the election center of the universe in 2024 because we are an economic bellwether for the rest of the country. When you start seeing layoffs in Michigan, you better be concerned around the rest of the country, because recessions come to Michigan first, they last the longest, and they hit us hardest because the economic policies of these Democrat extremists are pushing our jobs not just to other states, but to other countries. We've seen this movie before. We saw it in the recessions in the 80s. We saw it with NAFTA in the 90s. We saw it with the recession in the early 2008. And we're seeing it again now. These types of things, that losing 2,500 jobs in Warren, jobs that we should be doing here.
Not a manufacturer's choice. See, this is how ignorant some of us are. It's not a manufacturer's choice. It's not, because in order for them to compete against other manufacturers that's making parts over in the other parts of the world, you can't compete. If it costs you 4 times to make the part here in the United States of America because legislation allows for your competitor to go over to China to make it over there because they've incentivized them to be able to do so, then you have to do the same thing. Otherwise, either your company's gonna go out of business or you're gonna get swallowed up. So your legislative policies absolutely play a role in what your competitors do, which is one of the reasons why China forced American companies to partner with them in order to do business in their country. It's not as simple to say, oh no, that's just a manufacturer's choice. It's not. Because people don't want to pay 2 and 3 times the vehicle price just to say it's made here in America. The only thing that they care about is they simple. They thoughtless. They don't care about American jobs. They care about what's going to affect them right now. So the role of the government is to protect the American economy by incentivizing and preventing unfair practices in that way. And so you can't let other countries, you can't give it away and let other countries then say, and we know why they gave it away. We know what the incentive is. You can't give it away and then let other countries completely control what goes on here in the United States of America through bad legislation. I don't know why y'all don't understand that. Y'all, honestly, y'all gotta go and research and do your history on what these policies are. I know that's too much to ask. I ain't even gonna say all of that. Let's just go. Let's try.
These are the types of things that happen when the Biden it's forced automakers into survival mode. And that's the kind of thing that not just hurts the auto workers, right? Most of them who will be laid off will be junior auto workers, the younger folks for whom Santa Claus will be visiting right before Christmas.
Yeah.
It's going to be hurting suppliers. It's going to be hurting the bar and grill directly across the street, and they're going to have to lay off workers. This has a massive impact on Michigan's entire economy, and Kamala Harris is responsible for it.
Well, I think this is a really good...
When factories close, when a factory closes, it will destroy a whole town. I've seen, there's an Otis elevator factory out in Indiana, in Bloomington, Indiana. One of the biggest elevator factories around. It was thriving. It had over 400 or 500 employees. They're all getting paid very well. They all had homes, nice homes, a couple of acres, big trucks, lots of fun. When that factory closed, that town died. A portion of that town completely and utterly died. I saw people that I know that had large families, 2-3 children, beautiful wives, beautiful homes, 2 trucks, a car. I seen several of these people on the streets. I saw several of those people drugged out. 2-3 years passed, they were thriving, fantastic jobs, fantastic pay, lost those factory jobs at Otis Elevator, destroyed their life, destroyed the town. There was 3 restaurants right across the street from the factory, 3 restaurants, booming restaurants, gone. There's a corner gas station store that, was there before I even know. Once that factory left, gone. These jobs, not only to hurt the people who lose their jobs, it hurts everybody around them. These factories, once these factories close, it affects everybody. It's just like when a military base closes. That is probably the closest thing I can say to it. And I want to say a military base is probably worse, because a military base with the military personnel and all of the things that they need to have done on a military base, that probably is a lot more to the point of how it affected a town area. But it's the same thing. You take away people who are in that area, who are buying, who are selling, who are trading, who are working for. You take that away and stuff dies. Stuff just completely dies.
Point that you're making, because within Michigan and certain communities, the auto sector drives a lot of the activity. So it's got lots of legs in different industries, because they're all basically surviving on the strength of the auto sector. So it has a big impact. Liz Peek, jump in here, because this is a serious economic issue, and we're seeing those cracks in the auto sector first in Michigan, Liz.
Well, yeah, the government has made it almost impossible for these companies to move forward because of the EV mandates and all the other problems. But Congressman, I want to ask you about the relationship between the United Auto Workers leadership and their membership. It seems to me Donald Trump did pretty well with UAW workers in 2016, probably not quite so well in 2020. Shawn Fain just came out and basically sued Elon Musk and Donald Trump on pretty ridiculous charges that they were talking up firing strikers and stuff. How do you read this tension? I mean, is this are we going to see the auto workers turn out for Donald Trump in this election or not?
Well, first, good morning, Liz. Great to see you again.
Nice to see you, too.
Yeah, and second, Shawn Fain is trying to save his own skin. As part of the legacy of UAW leadership among many most recent presidents who have been popped for corruption, Shawn Fain has had a very bad past few months with those probes coming in from D.C. of all places, looking at allegations of corruption, but also losing in Alabama, and now this, where losing jobs potentially to Mexico with the layoffs in Warren and overflow work going to Saltillo. Shawn Fain is looking for anything. He's grasping at straws because he recognizes that his own union population isn't aligned with him. Shawn Fain has sold his auto workers out for environmental extremists and the Biden agenda. This is something that does not work for auto workers, and auto workers know it. Auto workers recognize not just that their jobs are going to other states and other countries, but they're less able to take care of their families long term. And the younger auto workers, the ones who just got started, those are the ones who are going to be hit hardest by the layoffs. The ones who have young families, they know that Shawn Fain's leadership is not working for them, and Shawn Fain is pointing the blame anywhere else he possibly can.
And that's a fact. And I think that, and it's funny because I believe that I got word and I needed to do a little bit more research on that, but I'm gonna be paying attention to the Democratic National Convention all week, and so I'll be covering that on this channel, obviously, and on the Anton Daniels channel. But Shawn Fain already sold y'all out. I told y'all that he sold y'all out, and so I told y'all to make sure that y'all get everything that y'all can right now, because some of y'all, a lot of y'all, are gonna suffer as a result of how it is that he aligned himself with this Biden-Harris administration and these policies that's ultimately gonna continue to send y'all jobs overseas. And he villainized everybody except for himself, and now he's also involved in a probe based off of corruption, and it's just going to continue to go downhill from there. So hopefully y'all get a little bit of insight from that, and I educated y'all on what to look for when it comes to having these conversations on why tariffs, North American Free Trade Agreement, jobs, economic policy, it all plays a part in your success.
Shout out to Anton, one of the best content creators out there. I'm going to, because Shawn Fain just did his speech at the Democratic National Convention. I'm going to do a separate show specifically on what he said at the National Convention, so we can talk about that. Also do a little, at the same time, I'll probably do a little thing about my talks with those people in the Midwest about who they're voting for and what their hopes are for the automotive industry back that way. But my main thing is that, and thank you, Anton. My main thing is that, the automotive industry is in such dire straits right now, and it's just been getting consistently worse. It's been getting consistently worse ever since the whole UAW debacle. I definitely saw all of the layoffs coming, because there's no way that they would, with the loss of market share that most automakers have seen over the last year or so. They should have understood that it was going to be financially hard for them to meet the demands that they set forth when they initiated the new UAW rules for these big three. And the cost has been so destructive. Lost so many. We do this show weekly. We're gonna do more episodes a week, because we're getting a lot more information. We're getting a lot more stuff to talk about. But every week we do a show, we tend to have at least one layoff, specifically at a factory, or maybe even executive at Stellantis that has decided that they're going to jump ship. It's been happening ever since we started this show. Probably a little bit before this show. And now that we're in the midst of the presidential race, and the automotive industry, as well as China and the tariffs and all these things, are important pieces to this whole situation, I don't see it getting any better. It's not going to get any better. It's going to have to be massive changes, because there's massive layoffs right now, and they're going to continue. They're not going to stop. We're going to definitely have another storyline of layoffs next week. We're going to definitely have a storyline of some GM executive leaving, or Stellantis. Stellantis is a major problem for me, and I want to end the show like this. Stellantis, I've decided that I believe Stellantis is just a corporate raider. It seems to me that Stellantis has just done things to make Chrysler and the companies that they took over fail. And I think that the executives know that. That is why we've covered all of these Stellantis executives that have jumped ship and decided to move on to other companies and all these things, because they know what's up. They know that Stellantis is a corporate raider, and they know that Stellantis is preparing to not only sell off Chrysler and these other companies, but they're going to sell them to what? BYD? Because that's who's aiming for it. BYD is so ready. They've reached out to so many people in the Americas to get them ready to sell the BYD vehicles, to find shops where they can, debunked dealerships that they can move their vehicles into. BYD is getting prepared to take this industry over. And I believe that Stellantis is helping them. For me, ever since the word Stellantis came into my sphere and I learned what Stellantis was, all I've heard is bad things that have happened for these companies, specifically Chrysler. Bad things. Ever since we heard the word Stellantis, all we've heard is bad things. And do we care that Shawn Fain is saying that Stellantis is bad? No. He's bad. We know that Shawn Fain is being investigated for all kinds of corruption. He's already taken jobs from people because they wouldn't help his girlfriend or some dumb junk like that. My friends, the automotive industry is dealing with the ultimate negativity that is encasing in our world right now. And it is destroying the automotive industry, and it's just not going to stop no time soon. So let's just, as people, specifically as automotive people, we have to stay steadfast. I'm going to continue to try to do everything in my power to make sure that some entity of the automotive industry stays vibrant here in America. All right, my friends, another show down. Truly sorry about missing those shows last week. I was all over in the Midwest and I just couldn't do it. But we will do a show about Shawn Fain's speech at the DNC convention. We'll do a little show about Indiana and the future there and what's going on there. And we'll keep you guys informed. Just stay tuned. I'm your boy Chris Surratt. Peace.